Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you so much, Eugenie, Nadia, and everyone involved. It's been a pleasure. It's been almost a year since we have been a part of DePIN Day, and I was talking to Tom about it. I think it's one of the most fantastic events which happens every year, and we're keen on supporting it time and time again. Regarding me, I'm Ayush. I'm one of the co-founder and CEO of Huddle01. At Huddle, what we are building is a DePIN for real-time connectivity. Every time when I am here on the stage, I try to play one of the videos, and this time I think we have that video ready, so I'll just go and talk about it. Who is here, who has helped us build this community from ground up and has put so much attention into detail into what our network does and has been playing around with our products, with our infrastructure, our network, and have been so jolly with us all around. And it feels like we are at day zero. I thank all of you and hope that we have a 5-year long run together and even more. That's it. Translate.
All right, here's the translation. मैं हर उस व्यक्ति का धन्यवाद करता हूँ जो यहाँ है, जिन्होंने इस कम्युनिटी को ग्राउंड अप से बनाने में हमारी मदद की है, हमारे प्रोडक्ट्स, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और नेटवर्क के साथ खेले हैं और हमारे साथ हर ओर खुश रहे हैं। ऐसा लगता है जैसे हम डे ज़ीरो पर हैं। मैं हर सभी का आभारी हूँ और आशा करता हूँ कि हमारे पास एक लंबी 5 साल की दौड़ है।
Awesome. So essentially, this was one of the products which we have built. In a video conferencing, there is an AI agent which has come into your room and is able to real-time translate what you are saying. And this is just one of the use case which we have built on top of our network. It's one of the products which is live right now. It can do a lot of things. It can do things like if you want to buy a crypto product, if essentially you want to do any kind of things like customer service, customer support, that's possible via the product which we have built. And all of this runs on the network of Huddle01, which we have been building for the last 4 years. Now, talking about DePIN, just before my talk, there was a panel, a VC panel, which talked about how important it is to balance between the supply side and the demand side. This is something which we have been thinking very, very deeply on. And how can you build a DePIN protocol, a DePIN project, which has a culmination of both supply and demand side? And you play and how do you tweak it, and how do you play a very important balance between these two? So at Huddle01, what we decided was that instead of just building supply first, we'll try to build demand. We'll try to make sure that there are a couple of demand on the top of our infrastructure first, make it progressively decentralized, and then launch that network. In terms of how we are, so we come under a bandwidth category. In bandwidth, what we have built is a real-time connectivity. As you can see here, you'll see a lot of different categories like CDN, edge, environmental, and bandwidth. You'll see a lot of players. All of them are solving different kind of things on a foundational level. What we are solving is for a low latency and a high bandwidth kind of communication. This is one of the biggest problems which was also talked about before my talk, which was that the dilemma of supply bootstrapping. Why just bootstrapping the supply is not enough? Because even when you do bootstrapping the supply side, sometimes the supply is not that great because of either supply being free or how the incentive systems are broken, where if you are just making sure that these people are running the nodes, they don't have that amount of actual compute or bandwidth and don't have any skin in the game. With what that leads to is also creating a lot of ghost networks. And because there is no amount of demand on top of your infrastructure, what is actually happening is just that there's enormous amount of supply and there's nothing to back that up. And that's where you need to make sure that you have to build it in a demand first manner. This is what we did at Huddle01, where we just built the demand first, built a lot of apps on top of our infrastructure, made sure that the network is completely not given out to the community on the day one itself, but after essentially a lot of apps have been built, then you launch it and give it to the community. And that's where we launched our media nodes. And interestingly, the media nodes we gave to people was not essentially for just run it. You had to essentially have a 4-core CPU, a 250 Mbps of internet connection, and you also required to provide a stake in the system by buying these nodes. By doing so, what we were able to do was quickly bootstrap the network, which essentially worked in a fantastic fashion, where now this network had a very good amount of supply side, very good amount of bandwidth, while they were also expecting a good amount of rewards in mainnet because there is already apps live there. And by doing so, taking this approach, we already had a very good traction. We were able to have 2200 quality nodes, already have 110,000 Mbps of bandwidth on our network, and our nodes have already procured more than $1 million of revenue. In terms of CPUs, we already have 1,000 cores, 1,000 CPU cores on the network right now. And in terms of demand of minutes, we have more than 8 million minutes of meeting already on the platform with more than 600,000 testnet transactions. Now, this in itself is just why we are being in phase 1 of testnet, while phase 2 and phase 3 of testnet are still coming up, and with mainnet coming up. And in the whole meantime, our apps on top of the infrastructure keeps on exponentially increasing the minutes of meeting. And this has been the journey for the last 4 years. We coined the term DRTC 4 years back, which is decentralized real-time communication. And we made sure that we built the world's first decentralized video conferencing app called Huddle01, which can do everything which Zoom can do, which Google Meet can do, which Microsoft Teams can do, but essentially in a completely peer-to-peer manner. It runs right now, it's live, and it's being used by a lot of people in the industry. Thirdly, we launched our beta network. We made sure that this network is live and it's being used by people, where we made sure that to run this network, you need to have certain specs and you need to stake in the system by buying these nodes. And this is how we have reached to a level where now 2000 nodes have been live, and this is the amount of bandwidth we have contributed to the network itself. And interestingly, what we realized very interestingly was that not only just decentralized communication, but you can also do things beyond that. You can do things in the space of DAI, you can do a lot of things in terms of CDN and much more. Now, in terms of possibilities, this is all what is possible on the network of Huddle01 right now. As you can see here, in terms of real-time media, we already have Huddle01 Meet, the app. We have Farhouse, which is again a audio app on top of Farcaster. And we have Huddle01 SDKs, which already powers apps on Lens, on Farcaster, and much more. And this is real-time finance, which means that even beyond that, let's suppose if you want to do a quick order execution, you want to make sure that you want to do things where there is a low latency in terms of order book mapping. All of those things are also possible via the network. And then these are the things which you can build on top of the network as well, making sure that you can do things in real-time AI, and also making sure that you can make things faster on the terms of blockchains as well. So essentially, since you have this asset of low latency and high bandwidth, you can do things beyond just communication. And that's what we started realizing after we started getting a lot of nodes, a good quality nodes towards our side. Now, this has been the traction in terms of our client apps. We have more than 40,000 users on the Huddle01 Meet platform, more than 5 million minutes of meeting. We have already done more than 160,000 meetings in totality, and we have done more than $10,000 in terms of revenue just on the app side. On Farhouse, which is one of the top essentially use cases of us on Farcaster, we have already have more than 9,000 users and done more than $60,000 in terms of revenue. The revenue there comes in terms of tipping. That means you can tip creators. And it's really, really hard to build a DePIN protocol with a product-first approach. But I think that's the way you make a sustainable tokenomics and a sustainable network at the end of the day. Similarly, in terms of our SDKs, it already powers apps on Lens protocol. It already powers app on Farcaster. And we try to basically make sure that it powers all the apps generally which requires audio video, and they can just use it in a plug-and-play manner. Now, in terms of Huddle01 for DAI, so this is very interesting, where now it can do things where now real-time AI agents can come into your video conferencing apps and can do any kind of real-time things which you want to do. If you want to make sure that you want to control your wallets, make sure that buy something, and any kind of things which requires AI agents which can just make your things 10x is possible via the network itself. And you can also use the AI01 framework which we have built to make sure that these AI agents in a real-time fashion can do things which requires low latency in general. This has been the impact which we have been created so far in terms of SocialFi, in the infrastructures out there, in terms of DePIN plays and ecosystem. All these people use Huddle01 is either as an app or in terms of the network or in terms of our SDKs, and it's been live. In terms of our revenue model, we have 6 ways in which Huddle01 earns revenue right now. Number one is via nodes. Number two is via the protocol fees, via SDK integrations, via consumer app subscriptions, microtransactions, and also via essentially the events IP which we have created. And this is our network snapshot, where if you notice that on the completely on the left side, you have clients, all the apps which Huddle01 network already powers. On top, you have the SDKs, where anyone who wants to build their own apps can use the SDKs to power. On the right hand side, you'll see the green side, that's the media nodes. Now, these media nodes essentially powers all of this network in general, and it runs on top of a layer 3 on Arbitrum right now. And this all provides and creates this commodity of low latency and high bandwidth. And this is how the whole economy looks like so far. Now, in terms of our roadmap, this is where we are. We started with doing phase 1 of node sales, which we did in November, and made sure there was 2,200 nodes which were live, which were public, and which were used essentially by people from all different parts of the world. By doing so, we have already created a shared infrastructure, a kind of a micro AWS for bandwidth in general. And this is what we call pools. If you go on to huddle01.network, you'll notice that this pool is live, and you can use it for any kind of service which you want in terms of low latency and high bandwidth. February 2025, what we are essentially doing is making sure that our testnet Act 1 became live, where anyone who were the pioneer node holders, so the people who essentially bought these nodes first, can run these nodes. And we are now battle testing it out. We have already made sure that these nodes which are being live already are able to power the calls in a much better fashion than what AWS does with Zoom. Our latency is around 30 milliseconds as compared to if you use a hypercluster like AWS, where the latency becomes supremely high to 150 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, based on the geography which you are a part of. Phase March is the next phase, which is the testnet Act 3, which is the Nexus phase, which we call. This is where we are increasing even the nodes beyond just 2,200, making sure there are tens and thousands of nodes out there. And we have got enough amount of data where we can know that where or in which geographies we need these nodes to be out there. Before my talk, I think Mahesh from EV3 gave a very interesting talk that you need to make sure that geographically also your nodes are in different in parts of the world where it can make sense a lot. And I think a couple of other protocols do a very good job in terms of making sure there's burst kind of system into it. And that's why we have also created incentive structure where if you want to run these nodes, and if you are in a part of the world where the supply is very low, you also get a more incentive to run these nodes in general. This is what Uber did very well back in the day, where if your supply was low and the demand is high, you to get the surge pricing. So that same concept we have baked into our crypto economics as well, making sure that you have surge pricing if there is essentially less amount of supply but huge amount of demand in terms of the network. And this is where we have observed very interestingly that if you follow this path of demand first and make sure that you have enough amount of demand on your network and try to then decentralize the network over time, you'll see that there are emergent properties and emergent behaviors which comes out of picture, where your infrastructure can do things beyond just what it was basically meant to do. A very good example of that at the start was one of the major DePIN protocols, which Helium did, where it started off just as a and it moved into basically creating a more of a carrier network, a mobile carrier network, while it started off as a completely different kind of network itself. But over time, when you realize that your network can do things just beyond what it was envisioned to do. And that's where we have now been seeing this real-time AI agents, seeing that real-time finance, and seeing different kind of things which requires this whole asset of low latency to serve to the market itself. And now this has been our journey so far. My co-founder is also sitting here. We have been building this network for a couple of years now, and we are inviting all the builders in general who essentially want to build any kind of audio video applications on their own, essentially in their own apps, which a lot of these social graphs do, or essentially want to make sure that they have a decentralized exchange and need to have a faster order book mapping, or essentially need to build an AI agent which requires a really low latency. They can just use our AI01 SDK or can use our Huddle01 SDK and launch it out in the market. Apart from that, we have our phase 2 of testnet coming up, which is huge in terms of making sure that different kind of protocols, different kind of products can come on top of us and essentially use the network for their own will. We are a team of 30 people now based all across the world. And yeah, it's always been a pleasure to come here and to chat in general. And thank you so much. This is me. Yeah.